Alright, I'd like to talk now in a little bit more detail about the editing tools that you have in Final Cut X. In particular, I want to talk about the editing tools, skimming, which is a wonderful and potentially really irritating thing in Final Cut X that you can turn on and off at will, and then trimming and all the different types of trimming that you can do and the different effects that they have on your timeline. So first of all, the editing tools, and those editing tools we're talking about are hiding under here. You can see the shortcuts for all of them. First one is Select, and Select allows you to move clips around in the timeline, and you're never going to destroy anything in the timeline this way. You can move them up into the secondary storyline track there, as Final Cut likes to refer to it, otherwise known, we call it like video track 2 normally, but they come up with their little storyline names for all these things. But anyway, you can move clips around, and these are all what we would call insert edits. So you're not going to destroy anything when you move it around in here. You're just going to move things around, and you can really see what the Final Cut X magnetic timeline looks like here. It's like we're moving a bunch of magnets in a row. Everything gets kind of nicely moved out of the way, and it is a really nice and easy way to swap a couple shots to see what they would look like. So that is the Select tool. Underneath it is the Trim tool, and that allows us to trim or kind of tweak the ins and outs of clips, and we can either change both the out of the outgoing clip and the in of the incoming, or we can just click one side and just change the duration of one clip, make it a little longer, a little shorter, depending on where we click. So if we click in the middle of the edit, it selects both. If we go to one side, it just affects one side of the edit or the other. Or if you see we get too far in the middle, it selects both ends of the edit, and we'll get into a little bit about what's going on with that. That's the Trim tool. And just so you know, you don't necessarily have to select the Trim tool to trim. You can also just put the Select tool over edit points, and you'll get some of the trim function that way without having to get into the Trim tool. Position is a lot like Select, except it's overwrite editing instead of insert editing. So you see I move this over here and let go. Nothing else moves around. Alright, and I just wiped out part of that clip. So if I bring this back, it's gone. Okay? So that is how you can just overwrite the heck out of your timeline. And there definitely are some times where you want to overwrite, where inserting is not what you wanted to do. For example, let's say I have this clip and I just want a little bit of black between these two clips. If we're in select mode, I just Command Z to undo that move. If we're in select mode, now every once in a while, when you make a space between clips, Final Cut generates this black clip, which is just kind of funny. It's sort of a clip of nothing. But you can see if I wanted to create a few seconds of black in between, you can't do it. In an insert edit, you can only kind of change the position of clips between each other in the timeline. You can't like just move it over and if there's nothing there. So you can go into the Position tool, move it over, and do what you want. So Position tool gives you a lot more freedom to mess around, but at the same time it also gives you a lot of freedom to mess stuff up. You can really destroy things with the Position tool, which is why Final Cut makes you hunt for it a little bit. They kind of think that you might not know what you're doing, so they put that away somewhere to make it a little harder for you. Range selection allows you to quickly select a certain range in the timeline. You can either click on a clip and select the whole thing, or you can click and drag and select parts, and then you can mouse over the edges to change that. And so that can make it quick and easy. You can click in the gray area to deselect that. But let's say I want to quickly delete the middle of this clip for some reason. I can use range selection, select that middle that I want to go, hit delete, and it's gone. So, or otherwise, another option is I could say I want a clip to go here. It will only let me go as far as the existing video. We're in a little bit of black here, but I can say I want a clip to go here. So up here in the browser, clip browser, I can say that's the clip that I want, and I'm going to hit D as overwrite, and it will fill in that particular spot. Shortcut is D to do an overwrite edit into the timeline. And there we go. So that's the selection tool. Blade is a handy tool that I've seen and that's available in every editor I've ever used. And the idea here is that you can click anywhere in the timeline and cut clips up. And Final Cut shows you that there's an edit by giving you this dotted line, and the dotted line is different from the solid line in that it's showing you that there is an edit here, but that nothing is removed from this original clip. So if you play it through, you're not going to see any difference. You'll only see a difference if you move these clips around a little bit. So if I go in here and go to position and grab one of these and move it over a little bit, now you see we get the solid line because there's something missing in this clip here, but not in this one. So the nice thing about Blade is that it can allow you to isolate certain portions of a clip. You know, let's say I wanted just this section of the clip to be black and white. It would play and then suddenly cut to black and white and then cut back. You can use Blade to isolate certain portions that way and have effects only apply to a certain part of the video, but have the video play through smoothly. Also, for beginning editors, it can be kind of nice if you're struggling a little bit with the various controls in the editor. It can be kind of like, you can use it kind of like a crutch. Like, oh, I want to get rid of the middle of this clip. I don't really remember the best way to do it, but I can blade it, cut it out that way, then click on it and hit delete. And so sometimes a blade is kind of a nice way for beginning editors to get work done that they don't know the better way to do it. You know, really the better way would probably be to mark it in and out like that and hit delete rather than taking the time to create the cuts and whatnot. But that's Blade. Blade is a pretty handy tool. And if you're going to be, if you want an effect to apply to only a certain part of a clip, it's critical. Blade is the best way to do that. Zoom is just kind of a easy way to move around. Here, I'll zoom out on my computer here and have a look at different parts of your timeline. If you hold down Option, you can see that the little magnifying glass becomes minus, showing that you're zooming out. I've had times where that stops working, like now. I'm not sure why, if it's just a little glitch in the system. So if you hit Option and you don't see the minus sign, don't worry about it. As long as it's doing what it's supposed to do, you're good. I got a couple of minuses out of that icon before. I was like, forget it. One of the cool things you can do with the zoom tool is you can click and drag a range and quickly focus in on that area. And remember, Shift-Z will zoom you back out so that your project fits the full length of the timeline window. So knowing those two, you know, if you hit the shortcut for Z to zoom, go check out an area, work there a little bit, Shift-Z to go back out. You know, I just want to focus on that edit, Shift-Z. So this can be a quick way to get in and out of your timeline. And then hand. And hand, we have to zoom in a little bit. The other option for zooming is here. Hand just allows you to move through your timeline without worrying that you're going to move anything by accident. Grab and move a clip. So you can also, if you have a laptop or a Mac with a mouse pad, whatever it's called, you know, the little click pad thing, you can finger scroll left and right and go that way. But you also have the hand if you want to just be able to move over a little bit. And you can see that this scroll bar pops up when you move. So if you got a long ways to go, you can grab that. So that's the hand. Those are the editing tools that you have available to you in Final Cut X. Now, a couple of other kind of interesting buttons going on here. Let me turn off effects here a second so we can see a little bit more. Over here in the timeline, we have a couple of important buttons to choose from. Some of these may already be on for you, and so your screen may be looking different than mine. But this is video skimming, and what video skimming does is when I move my mouse over the timeline or I move my mouse over a clip in the browser here, it starts skimming through that video. And that honestly drives me nuts. Final Cut's the only time I've ever seen an editor do that. You can also turn audio skimming on. If you have skimming on, you can choose to have audio skimming on or off. And what that does is when you move through video, you also hear the audio, or what we typically would refer to as audio scrubbing, but they call audio skimming. And there are certainly times where that could be useful if you're trying to isolate a certain part of audio in a video, but I would not like to have that on by default, and I would generally recommend turning video skimming off too, unless you find it's really important. It'll just save your computer some effort of constantly having to show you different parts of your video that you don't really care about seeing. Next to that, here we have snapping. And what's funny is if you're looking at the Focal Easy Guide to Final Cut Pro X, at least in my version, they have the icon wrong for this. They have snapping on is actually the skimming icon on, and snapping off is the actual snapping icon. You can see the difference between the two. One's got kind of like an explosion, and one is just a line. So what snapping does is if when you get close to an edit point, you can see the kind of blue line or blue box at times jumping as I move this, and that's allowing me to snap to in and out points, to edit points. And that's really handy because you would hate to be off a little bit and then, you know, accidentally splice a clip in half. So this helps you make sure that you got clips butted up against each other real nice, because if you screw that up, you can end up with little flashes of black where you didn't have two clips right next to each other. Sometimes you get flash frames because you just trimmed a frame or two off. So snapping is really important, and every editor I've seen has it in some way, some fashion. But there are times where you might want to turn it off because you might want to do just a little tiny move like that. If I can get it to go, just come on, wake up. Snapping is off. Okay, hang on, I forgot you gotta switch tools for this. In Select, even with snapping off, where Final Cut really still doesn't want you to do these little moves. So you have to go down to Position, and then you can do tiny little moves like that. So honestly, with Select on, there's not a huge difference between snapping on and off. It still is basically behaving like its good old magnetic timeline self. So to really see the benefits of that, you have to turn snapping off as well as switching to the position tool here. Then you're going to see a difference. All right, we'll turn snapping back on, and what you'll see, it jumps. When we get close to an edit, it wants to jump there. So if you wanted to do something really tiny in there, you see it jumps right to it. And so you can very well like fine tune that. So that's snapping most of the time. Great to have it on. Every once in a while when you want to tweak something just a certain way, you want to turn that off. Okay, so let's talk about trimming right now. We have the trim tool here, which is handy for giving you some more trimming options. I'll zoom in here a little bit. And so with just the regular select tool, you can see we can select one side of the edit or the other, and we can click and we can drag, and I'm subtracting from this Goodbye Michigan segment. Maybe we can zoom out a little bit to see that in the grand scheme. Highlight it, shows you which one you're working with, and then if you drag it way out to the end of the clip, it will turn red. and that will indicate that you have no more media there. Let's see, this one's going for quite a while. There we go. So when that bracket turns red, that means you're at the limit of your original media. You can't go any further. Footage doesn't exist beyond that point. All right, but with the trim tool, we can do a bunch of different types of trim effects. For example, a roll, which they call it a roll because it's sort of like it's rolling through these two clips. As you subtract from one clip, you add from the other, and the edit kind of rolls through. Notice we're not changing the duration of our timeline at all. As I subtract from this outgoing clip, we add from the incoming clip. And so it's sort of like, I don't know, if you can imagine a roll of wrapping paper or something. Well, I guess it'd have to be two sheets or something. One sheet's rolling into the roll while the other sheet's rolling out. That probably doesn't help you a whole lot. But at any rate, that is a roll edit, and that's where you're changing the duration of both segments at the same time. So if you're like, oh, I like this edit, but I wish it came a little bit earlier, you can grab those two and move it that way, and you'll be adding to this segment, taking away from this segment, if you wanted to change the timing on that a little bit. Now, a slip edit, when you click in the middle of a segment, when you have the trim tool selected, you see both are selected. So that means both are changing at the same time. And what that means is as we click and drag, it's pretty cool. You can see the video changing in the background. We are slipping through this clip so that we're getting to showing an earlier part of the clip here and then cutting off from the end. So we're keeping its duration in the timeline the same. We're just choosing a different portion of the clip to look at. And you can see here, when that window pops up, it's showing you the new in and out for that particular clip. All right. It's kind of nice the way that Final Cut displays this when you're in this particular timeline view mode. I think it makes it a little easier to understand what's going on. But we're basically slipping through this raw footage to see and to view an earlier portion from that clip when we go that way, or we can drag to the left, click and drag, and see a later portion. So that is a slip edit. Now, another option you have is the slide edit. And we have to hold down the Option key while we do this. And as we click that, things get crazy. Look at that. And so what's happening here, again, Final Cut's giving you a sense of what it's doing by indicating by highlighting the edit points in the sides of the edits to show you what's being modified. The outgoing clips out is being modified. The next clips in is being modified, but this is not changing. This clip is staying exactly the same. We're just kind of changing its position here in the timeline so it comes a little bit earlier. And it comes earlier because we're taking footage off of here and then filling in the gap with the next clip. So again, you have to hold on Option to do that. I just did an accidental slide there, but this is a slip. And so you can kind of like imagine if you're walking on ice and you slip, it's like your feet move, but you don't. And you fall down. So consider that like a slip, like a wheel spinning, but the car is not going anywhere. A slide, then, hold Option, is where you imagine like the whole car is sliding along, or you're sliding along and the whole thing is moving that way. Okay, so those are a couple of different types of trims that you can do. Getting a little bit advanced, rolls are pretty common, and then to do these one-sided trims is very common too, and good to know how to do. Slips and slides are, they're a little bit less common, but they definitely could be handy for when you're fine-tuning and you just want to tweak things a little bit, or you're trying to sync something up just perfect. Final Cut does have another feature that can make this whole trimming nonsense seem a little bit easier to understand, and that is the Precision Editor. And so let's see if we can get that to work. If we mouse over an edit point with the Select tool and double click, what it does is it expands our timeline to show the extra footage that is for each clip that is not currently in the timeline. So that's grayed out there. We call that padding, or I can't remember other terms that we have for it, but basically this allows you to see the footage that's not currently in the timeline, but you have available to you for trimming. So you can see this is as long as this segment goes. So if I was going to trim this particular clip out like this, I would get to there, and that's the end of that particular segment. I can't go any further. So for folks who are just beginning in editing, it can be kind of confusing when you get that red bracket and you don't know why. And so with the Precision Editor, it makes it a little easier for us to see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. None of this footage is going to be seen in the video as it is right now, but it's a great way for you to be able to see what excess footage is available. And then you can mouse over the edit point and it goes back. Sometimes it takes a little while, or you can actually go to close Precision Editor. It's probably the faster way. Let's see, is it gonna... Come on. Yep. Just click Close Precision Editor. That will make it go away. Now, one really cool thing in Final Cut that I have seen in other editors, but I didn't see it in the original Final Cut, so I'm glad that they've added this in Final Cut X. And this is called, well, in the textbook they refer to as trimming while playing back in the timeline. But in Avid, we would call this tops and tails. And what this is something I use a ton. And so when I moved from Avid into Final Cut, I was kind of disappointed that I didn't see this. What it is as you're playing, or if you're paused at a particular point, it allows you to really quickly delete everything in that segment, either before the position indicator or after the position indicator. And this is a really useful tool in editing, because generally when we're doing our rough edits, we bring in a lot of extra stuff, and we'll have little bits at the end that we don't want, and we want to get rid of those little parts, or parts at the beginning. It's extremely common to just be like, oh, there's a little bit of extra there that I don't want. I'm trying to cut this down. And so the keyboard shortcut for that is Option plus right bracket will trim from the edit point to the right to the next edit point, or from the position indicator to the next edit point, and Option and left bracket will do the other direction. So if I want to do a top where you cut the top off, again, this is Avid terms, not necessarily Final Cut X terms, I can hold down Option left bracket, and it just trimmed off that left edge from the position indicator to the left. And then kind of vice versa, Option right bracket knocks that little end off of there. So it may not seem like a big deal. You could do the same thing by just marking it an in and out, and hit delete. But because it's such a common thing, and that's 3 keystrokes as opposed to 1 keystroke, Option right bracket, it's just it's something that really speeds up the editing process, and I just love that feature. So I refer to it as tops and tails. Call it whatever you want, but the main thing to remember is the shortcut, which is Option left bracket to do a top, Option right bracket for a tail, and that will trim those little bits off just to the next edit point. Okay, next time we're going to talk about retiming, which is pretty awesome, basically changing the speed of clips in Final Cut, faster, slower, backwards, whatever. But hopefully now you've got a pretty good understanding of some of the more advanced features of editing in Final Cut X. Still a ton to learn, but I'm hoping that this will spare you some of the frustration of editing when you want to do something and you can't figure it out. The more you know about the different tools and tricks in Final Cut X, the more pleasurable editing will be.